Good evening and welcome to the Minnesota Legislative District 30A and B Candidate Forum hosted by the Elk River Area Chamber of Commerce tonight. My name is Matt Westgard, and on behalf of the Elk River Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, I will be your moderator for tonight. I'd like to start by thanking the City of Elk River for the use of their facility, the room, their AV equipment, and audio-visual support. I'd also like to thank the candidates for being here tonight to help provide important information to the voters as they head to the polls in November. Tonight's event is being recorded live and will also be available on the Chamber's website, social media channels soon after the forum is over. A couple pieces of important information and requests. The Elk River Area Chamber does not assume any party affiliation, nor do we endorse any candidate. We are hosting this forum to provide information about the candidates to the public. Since this public information forum is not a campaign event, we respectively request that all candidates and audience members refrain from applause or comments that could cause disruption from the forum. So thank you in advance. I'm joined tonight by Brenda Rue, who will be is also a member of the Chamber's Board of Directors and Government Relations Committee. She will be our timekeeper. She will provide you with a signal when you have 30 seconds left in your response, and then upon the end of that 30 seconds, a stop red signal. We just ask that you wrap up your response as quickly as you can so we can stay on target with everybody's and allowing everybody ample time to answer the question. Each candidate will answer the same questions. We'll rotate the order in which the answers of the questions are first and second. Each question has an allocated amount of time. If there's any questions on the floor, or if you would like me to reread the question when it comes to your time to answer, please just let me know, and I would be happy to read the questions. Any questions before we get started? Okay, well then we'll jump right into it. I know there'll be an opportunity for some of you to also just introduce yourselves, but first, we would like to just take and cover a couple quick questions. And why don't we start right here with Mr. Hudson. First question about taxes and spending. Due to the large increase in government spending in 2023, the budget forecast now shows state spending growth outpacing tax revenue growth. If the state were to encounter a budget deficit, how would you balance the state's budget, cut spending, increase taxes, or is there another approach? This question, you have 1 minute.
I think there are ample opportunities to look at cutting back on government spending. We raised the state budget by 40% in the last term, 40. So even if you were to just look at half of that increase as a potential place to look for places to save a penny or two so that we could balance the budget, I think that would be quite reasonable. We had billions of dollars that went out the door to nonprofits that are unaccountable. We've seen multiple stories regarding the fraud that's been attached to some organizations in that space. I think there's plenty of opportunity in order to provide accountability and tackle waste, fraud, and abuse. Indeed, we've seen over 13,000 residents in 2021 and 22 leave the state, and it wasn't just the people, it was their money. Minnesota lost $2.19 billion in income to other states. That's billion with a B. Our budget is measured in Bs. So this is a big deal. Making sure that we have a friendly and competitive tax environment is absolutely necessary.
Thank you. We'll go next to Ms. Buckmeyer.
Yes, so the number one job of the legislature is to set and pass a budget, and this includes decisions about taxes and spending. Minnesota tax policies have been effective in supporting our state's economic growth and improving the quality of life of all residents. We pay taxes, and in return, we see investments in strong schools, robust infrastructure, and essential public services that benefit everyone. In this, I believe with the newest data out, there actually is not a deficit looming. that we are actually turning that corner and we are not going to be in that. So I just believe that the government must set budgets based on sound fiscal policies and provide fair taxation that promote growth, conserve resources, and support full unemployment. Being fiscally responsible means investing in programs that deliver long-term benefits and ensure a stronger future for all Minnesotans.
Thank you. We'll just keep moving right down the line, Mr. Novotny.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, isn't it sad that we are at a state right now where we consider anything less than $1 billion a rounding error? And if it's close to $1 billion, we'll consider that close enough. No, we're going to be in the hole, and when the automatic inflation adjustments kick in the budget that they put in the last session, we'll be in the hole. Either way, we had the $18 billion of surplus that we threw into the pot last time. That's not there. That's I don't know where we're going to get that. We had a number that just came out yesterday. Over 6,000 full-time employees were added in the last budget. Many of them have not been filled. I say the first day that we're there, we start taking out the red pen and striking budgets. Anything that isn't spent, anything that's not discretionary, that needs to go. If they're a full-time employee that is not public safety or care in some home related, those jobs should be froze until we get a lot better idea what's going on.
Thank you. And Mr. Boland.
Well, good evening and thanks for having me. So I believe in a community-focused approach when it comes to taxation and spending. We have to keep in mind that, yes, we do have small businesses and large businesses that rely on a low tax rate, yet we also have community services, we have healthcare infrastructure, we have built infrastructure that does in fact rely on some degree of tax revenue. So we need to find a balanced approach that's going to take into consider both. I believe that we need to consider our bureaucracy and consider cutting waste there. I worked with the Minnesota Department of Health for some time, and I've seen personally the degree of waste and bureaucracy that is there. And so I'm not blind to that, but we need to take a balanced approach to this and not view this as, do we cut services or do we raise taxes? Because we can find ways to do this that balance everybody's interest.
Thank you. One follow-up question on the same topic, and we'll take it in reverse order. The Minnesota corporate tax rate is the highest in the nation. What is your philosophy around balancing individual versus corporate tax rates? You have 1 minute to answer this follow-up.
Minnesota is one of the best places in the country to do business. If a high corporate tax rate were such a disincentive for bringing businesses here, all the Fortune 500 businesses would be in Arkansas and Mississippi, where they have very low tax rates. So we need to, yes, consider the corporate tax rate, delve into the details as to whether that is a disincentive for business, if it's causing businesses to go, which I don't believe it is, and then consider what we need to do with the corporate tax rate. But I don't believe that cutting corporate tax rates is going to draw business into Minnesota, because as I said, if that were true, there are a lot of other states that would be thriving like we are right now.
Thank you. Mr. Novotny.
3M, Honeywell, all these legacy Minnesota companies that have already moved out. Last year alone, 3M closed their headquarters. That was over 1,000 employees, and those weren't starting level jobs. Those were upper level management that we lost. 1,000 jobs from one facility alone. I just met this morning with members of the Central Minnesota Manufacturing Association. They were telling me how, on top of taxes and some of the workforce mandates that we're putting in, how expensive it's going to be. We're going to touch on other issues later in this discussion, but everything is snowballing, and we don't have much time left. And once we lose these businesses, yeah, we won't get them back.
Thank you. Ms. Buckmeyer.
Our progressive tax system ensures and structure ensures that those who can contribute more do so, while easing the burden on working families and seniors. It allows us to fund essential services that benefit everyone, from childcare to healthcare to education and infrastructure. Also, we need to ensure that corporations pay their fair share of taxes, and our tax system is transparent and accountable. Making corporate tax information public and addressing tax avoidance are critical steps in creating a system that works for everyone. By maintaining smart, fair tax policies, we can create a balanced approach that supports growth across all sectors while safeguarding Minnesota's economic future. When we invest in our state and its people, we are building strong communities and a more prosperous future for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
There's broad bipartisan recognition that taxation disincentivizes behavior associated with it. That's why we offer things like tax credits, which we might talk about later in our conversation about housing, because we recognize that when you lower the tax burden on a person, they're more capable of providing what they need in order to go about living their lives. So recognizing and having a humble approach to the impact that taxation has is something that I think should be a broad value that's shared across party lines. It's interesting, Fortune 500 companies were evoked as being able to survive the onslaught of taxes that have been raised on them, and later we'll talk about business mandates as well. Sure, they're big, they can absorb it. The problem we need to look at is the small businesses throughout our communities that are run and managed by the folks who live there, families who want to leave something for their children and are trying to engage in the entrepreneurial spirit that lies at the root of what our country was founded upon. And so we should be providing support for them as well.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next topic, energy. As Minnesota transitions to new sources of power generation, how should the state balance the goals of affordability, reliability, and sustainability with the push for renewable energy? Should this transition be driven primarily by regulation and mandates, or is there another approach you believe would be more effective? You have 2 minutes to answer this question, and Ms. Buckmeyer, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, thank you for the question. Minnesota has made significant progress in transitioning to renewable energy, with wind, solar, and nuclear already playing a substantial role in that energy mix. We have an ambitious plan to achieve 100% clean energy by 2040, and it's a goal that we should attain and should meet. As one of the fastest warming states in our nation, we cannot ignore the impacts of climate change on our communities, our infrastructure, and our natural resources. I believe in safe, sustainable, and secure energy sources that provide future generations with reliable and affordable power. While currently we rely on a diverse mix that includes coal, wind, nuclear, natural gas, and solar, it's essential to expand the use of renewables and invest in innovative technologies like virtual power plants and energy storage. These advancements will strengthen the grid reliability and help us meet the growing energy demands that expand without expanding fossil fuel infrastructure. With that, we look to, by developing cutting-edge technologies, we can drive economic growth by reducing our carbon footprint. To support this transition, we need to create strong incentives for businesses, farmers, and families, making it easier and more affordable to adopt these practices. We have a long history of protecting and investing in our resources. The path to clean energy requires collaboration, smart planning, and by this, we can do it by working together. I'm committed to finding solutions that work for all of us, and doing nothing is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move next to Mr. Hudson. You have 2 minutes.
So I don't know if folks can see it, probably not because it's too far away, but this is the MISO current real-time output of where our energy sources are coming from. Currently, 36% plus of our energy that's fueling our state and our regional network right now is coming from coal. 35% of it is coming from natural gas, almost 13% from nuclear, and then it goes down to 7% for wind. Solar is under 2%, and then we have imports and other. What the trifecta did over the last 2 years is they passed an energy mandate that's going to require us to get what they define as carbon-free energy by 2040. Not included in the definition is, what's the quick and dirty math here? Over 70%, actually currently over 80% of what currently keeps these lights on. That is insane policy. That is not sustainable by any measure. I find it interesting that we have such a focus on the potential of crisis. What happens if we don't address climate change? What happens if we don't address environmental impacts on things like clean air and clean water? Well, we are addressing those things. We're addressing them in sensible ways, right here in our communities. But the idea that we're going to forego all of the consequences of engaging and enacting in such radical climate policy or energy policy betrays a lack of seriousness about where our future is going to go. We need to be concerned about an energy crisis that, these two gentlemen, Joshua Antonia and Jason Hayes, wrote a paper about this. I got to meet them at a recent legislative forum. They also wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal. And what they found is that states throughout that MISO network that I just showed you are all tilting in this direction. And they're all doing so under the premise that we're going to be able to borrow excess energy from each other. That's not going to work. The lights are going to go off. That's the real crisis that we ought to be focusing our attention on.
Stop. Thank you. We'll move to the other end, Mr. Bolin.
Well, let's be clear. There is one party that does not believe that climate change is a problem, and that needs to be understood. I personally believe in an all of the above approach. I do not believe that we need to set hard timetables as to when we get to energy neutrality and when we get to reducing our carbon footprint to a certain amount. I think those are aspirational, but they also shouldn't hog-tie us. And so I do believe in incentives to increase the development and use of nuclear resources, but also understanding that practically we need to be concerned about where Minnesotans are getting their energy and the costs of energy. That doesn't mean that we go and we cut coal completely or cut natural gas completely. Those are essential areas where we do get our energy from. And so I do not believe in rigid timelines to try to cut certain areas where we get our energy from. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it's realistic. I think that we can approach the issue of climate change in a realistic way, that we can protect our beautiful lands and our beautiful environment and our water for future generations, because we do need to be mindful of that. Even though we don't necessarily experience the effects of climate change on a daily basis, this is something that is getting worse. And if you have small kids or small grandkids, you want to leave an environment for them that's clean and sustainable, and that they can enjoy just like we've enjoyed our environment.
Thank you. Mr. Novotny.
I want to sound like my dad. I walked uphill both ways to school. Look, I remember when Elk River had the plant here in town, and they would burn coal, and the snow would be gray because there'd be so many cinders. Or when I started working in Sherburne County for the sheriff's office, you could see the smoke coming out of Sherco. By the time I retired, it wasn't a smokestack, it was an exhaust stack. It was hot air coming out because we were so good at cleaning that and making sure that it was done as efficiently and cleanly as possible. Now they tell us that CO is a worldwide problem. So while we're shutting down Sherco, one of the cleanest, most efficient plants in the world, on the other side of the world, they're putting up plants as fast as they can build them. It's going into the same atmosphere. Being born and raised in Minnesota, I believe in climate change. It happens just about every day. Check with me next February. Look, we've got problems coming. For those of you that are like me and don't realize the passage of time, 15 years is all we have until 2040. The DFL passed these laws, and it's not a moderation, it's not this, it's carbon-free 2040 in 15 years. If you've looked around and seen how long it takes to build a power plant or do the permitting, heaven forbid there's a three-toed frog that's somewhere been seen once 40 years ago where you want to build this power plant, you're not getting a permit. If we started now, we couldn't have a permit built. We have 2 nuclear plants in this state that are both getting timed out. They're past their recommended life. We keep extending them. There's a moratorium that the DFL has kept prohibiting any further building. But they will allow the building of a nuclear plant if it's for Bill Gates and an AI facility. So my priority is not Bill Gates. My priority is not Microsoft. I want the senior citizens to be able to have their homes heated when it's 20 below.
Thank you. We'll keep moving. Next topic for the candidates is workplace mandates. Do you believe state government has a role in developing the workforce through wage and benefit mandates, or should that responsibility fall to employers, employees, and market conditions? You have 2 minutes to answer this question, and Mr. Novotny, we will start with you this time.
Thank you. The state wants to get involved in everything, and the state under the current leadership wants to get involved in everything. They want to be there to take their share of the profit of anything that's made, and if you go out of business, that's your problem. They interfere with the relationships with the employees, and they keep raising these costs. Now, keep in mind, we're all paying those costs. The business, if they're going to survive, has to make money or pass on the cost, and that's affecting everyone. If we look at all the add-ons that we've done, the paid family medical leave, the earned sick and safe time, they're going to tell us how to have a retirement program. If you're a good employer and you've got employees that you want to keep, these are all things that you don't need the interest of. The state getting their nose in. Would you want, well, I'll take it, I was going to say, would you want the state to get involved in how you raise your family? But we're doing that now too. The state, is there anything that you can think of that the state does well that we want to increase? I don't. We need to get down to our core things that the state is supposed to do, let people run their businesses. If they've got employees that aren't happy with what's going on, they can get a different job. If the employees are happy, they'll stay. But the employer has to make money to pay the employees, to pay the benefits. And everything we keep piling on them, it's not helping. One of the terms that we use down at the state to make the other side's head spin is we call them job providers as opposed to employers, because apparently that's the thing. They're providing jobs.
Okay, thank you. Let's move down the dais to Mr. Boland.
Could you please repeat the question?
Certainly. The topic is workplace mandates. Do you believe state government has a role in developing the workforce through wage and benefit mandates, or should that responsibility fall to employers, employees, and the market conditions?
So I believe that we are a community of people, and we need to consider the personal and family needs of every single person within our community. And yes, 2 in 3 jobs in this community come from small businesses. However, we also have people, and people have daily things, sometimes unexpected things that happen. For instance, my mom had to have surgery for breast cancer, and thank God that I was available to be there with her hand in hand when she was going through one of the scariest moments of her life. That would not happen if programs were not available to ensure that we have the ability to take care of our loved ones. My grandma had a medical issue last month. Thank God that I didn't have to work because I'm running this campaign. These are things that affect people on a daily basis, and we're talking about things that are so integral to our quality of life. We need to ask ourselves, what are our values? Are our values a ledger that we can put a dollar sign on quality of life and our ability to take care of our loved ones? Or are we more than that? Are we a pro-family state? Are we a state where neighbors look out for one another? Because I personally believe the community that I grew up in here in Elk River, we're a community that looks out for one another. Even if the ledger doesn't look exactly what we want it to look like, we take care of each other. And yes, these programs are important and they do improve lives.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hudson, you are next.
Earlier, it was stated when we were talking about the energy transition that we should work together on coming up with solutions to these problems. Boy, I wish that's the way it went down over the last 2 years. Instead, the perspectives of business owners, the people who are going to be most directly impacted by these types of intrusive mandates, were completely shut out of the conversation. Republicans were not part of any of the development of any of these ideas, and every amendment we put forward, every time we tried to bring the voice of people who are going to be adversely affected by this, we were shut down. We were most certainly not working together when it comes to business mandates. And we weren't concerned about the values of the millions of people in Minnesota who are represented by the other party that was not in trifecta power. Recently, I sat at a legislative update at the I-94 Chamber of Commerce, and we heard a lot of feedback from a lot of business owners about these mandates. I got an email the next day from a gal who runs a temporary staffing agency. And I'm going to read you verbatim what she said. She said, "We place contractors and employees directly into jobs and projects in Minnesota as well as across the country. We truly hope to continue to do business in this state. That said, if this Paid Family Medical Leave Act stays the same, we will be forced to add Minnesota to our list of California and Colorado, the other states where we will not work within at this time." And this is an organization, this is a business that provides temporary staffing for people when they need it. And so if the people who are providing the temporary staffing for when your person goes out for 24 weeks under these new mandates are not going to be operating in our state, where are we going to get the people from? This is very thoughtless, and it applies to every employer. That includes your city, it includes your county, it includes your school district. I was on the Albertville City Council for 7 years. If our financial director, who knows where all the financial bodies are buried, had to leave for 25 weeks, and not necessarily all at the same time, that would be a disaster for our city.
Thank you. Ms. Buckmeyer.
Okay, thank you. The majority of Americans are just one medical crisis away from losing their home or place to live. And Minnesota is leading the way in supporting workers' rights and creating healthier work environments through comprehensive workplace policies. Our paid family and medical leave program that's starting in 2026 will provide up to 20 weeks of paid leave per year, ensuring that workers can care for themselves, their families, without financing or sacrificing their financial security. This is more than just policies. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and the realities we all face when caring for a newborn, an aging parent, or recovering from an illness. When we support each other in these moments, our entire community is stronger. Supporting the American labor movement and the rights of all workers is essential for building a strong economy. By providing fair and comprehensive workplace policies, we're not only protecting workers, but we're also ensuring that Minnesota remains a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. Policies like the paid family medical leave and the earned sick and safe time touch all of us. We all know somebody that this is going to affect. So this is ensuring that every worker can take care of their family without worrying about losing their income. This kind of support is grounded in compassion and benefits not just workers, but businesses and our entire state. When we invest in our people, we're investing in Minnesota, and we're making it a great place to live and to raise again our families. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next topic, childcare. Question is, workforce shortages in our region are significantly impacted by the lack of available and affordable childcare slots. Particularly in home childcare providers face increasing pressures from recent legislative initiatives and rule changes. What specific actions or policies would you support to address these challenges and ensure that more families can access the child care they need to participate in the workforce? Again, 2 minutes on this question, and we will start at the far end with Mr. Bolin.
So our child care providers, they have a service that so many people cannot afford, and yet they cannot afford to lower prices without going out of business. So what do we do? What do we do? Right now, there is a bill sitting in the State House, which did not get passed for reasons. There is a bill sitting in the State House that would provide a scholarship for daycare for families making under 150% of the state median income level. This is something that is a lifeline to families. Furthermore, the cost of childcare exceeds the cost of many people's mortgage. This is going to disincentivize having children. It's also going to disincentivize people going to work and participating in our economy. It's going to push the burden of childcare onto grandparents, which I know many of you grandparents love to see your grandkids, but do you want to do it for a living? I don't know. But this is something, again, coming back to a values-based system where we have to ask ourselves, do we look out for families in this state? Do we look out for families, or do we say, oh, well, you were born, your child is born, you're on your own? I know the kind of state that I want to live in. I want to live in a state where we look out for one another, and that includes making sure that every family has the ability to take care of their children, and if they so choose, to be able to have a job and to participate in this economy.
Thank you. We'll come down to this end. Mr. Hudson, you're next.
So what we need to do is roll back a lot of the policies that have put a boot on the throat of family child care providers. And so family child care providers, again, are small businesses run in neighborhoods who provide child care in an at-home model. And they have absolutely suffered under the years of recent changes in policy. Hundreds of them have closed across the state, over 700 at last count. And meanwhile, the proposals that we're hearing are all funneling students into the center-based care. Now, center-based care might be a fine option for some parents, but it's certainly not a universal option. If you work second shift, if you work third shift, if you work an irregular job with irregular hours, or maybe you're on call and you have to be able to be nimble in terms of your occupation, you can't contract with a center to take your kid from 8 a.m. to 3, or whatever their contract is, or whatever their hours are. And so we need to have more options available. Instead, we've been getting less. We need to have more environments available for people to place their kids in when they're going to work, especially ones that are close to home, especially ones where they have a neighborly relationship with the person who's providing the childcare. And I'll tell you something else. My wife and I were very, very lucky. Her mother was able to provide childcare for us as our kids were coming up, and that was absolutely invaluable. Undoubtedly saved us tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do that. But wouldn't it be nice if we recognized that type of support as being worthy of investment as well? There should be some way, similar to like the PCA system, where we provide supports for people to provide care to those in need, to actually support families and neighbors and friends to do this work right in their home.
Thank you. We'll move next to Ms. Buckmeyer.
The child care crisis in Minnesota is one that is facing families and affecting everyone in our communities. In outstate Minnesota, there's roughly 40,000 child care slots that are needed and aren't there. Many parents are struggling to find the care they need to remain in the workforce. The shortage is not only a barrier for families, but also for businesses, which are finding it difficult to attract and retain employees due to the lack of affordable child care options. As someone who took time away from my career to raise our 4 children, I know these challenges the families face. I know them firsthand. With flexible work schedules and remote work, that's not always an option. That's not a complete solution. We need to look at innovative approaches to child care, such as encouraging employers to offer on-site daycare and for the state to support it in community investments in child care facilities. The needs for accessible child care are, again, like we said, needed by everyone. This shortage hinders our economic growth, making it difficult for communities. So I would support programs like the Child Care Economic Development Grants and the Greater Minnesota Child Care Facilities Grants that have been crucial in addressing these gaps, but they will require ongoing and expanded support to meet this demand. Additionally, the high cost of child care is a significant burden on families. The legislature did propose a 7% cap on your income. Again, as Paul had mentioned, some families are paying over 20%. Programs like the Great Affordability Start scholarships can help bridge these gaps and provide the help that families need to remain in the workforce. So by prioritizing childcare, we are laying the foundation for a thriving Minnesota for every family.
Thank you. Mr. Novotny.
Thank you. And I have met with center-based care facilities in our city, and I've met with and talked with people that are in residential-based care facilities, and both of them seem to be under the impression that it's the state that's causing most of these problems because of these mandates that they have in the staffing levels, the pay levels, subsidizing levels that don't cover the cost. And the last thing that they needed was this latest, I believe it was about a 90-page revision of mandates and rules that were going to come in. Now, the industry was able to convince DHS to postpone those rules for a little bit so they can have more input and start trying to let them know just how bad it'll be. To me, I think the child care system has been in trouble ever since Governor Dayton mandated that the union workers or the daycare workers become unionized. Like whatever the state gets involved in, the more the state's involved, the state has to get more involved. So pretty soon now we're at the point where we're talking where we have to have state subsidized to run the daycares. It's a dog chasing its tail. There's no better way to say it. And the more the state gets involved in daycare or energy or workplace mandates, it never ends well.
Thank you. Next topic is housing costs. A study by Housing First Minnesota indicates that it is more expensive to build the same house in Minnesota than in neighboring states, contributing to skyrocketing new housing prices. Given that affordable housing is critical to attracting and retaining a workforce, what legislative measures or other changes do you support to address this issue and make housing more affordable in our state? We will start, you have 2 minutes to answer this question, and we will start with Mr. Hudson.
So I think the important thing to recognize in housing or any narrow area of focus that we tend to center on when we talk about public policy is that it doesn't exist on an island. It's impacted by every other policy jurisdiction that we legislate within. It's impacted by government action at all levels of government. So why is housing expensive? Well, in part because everything is. And why is everything expensive? Well, because we have out-of-control government spending, particularly at the federal level, and irresponsible monetary policy where we just print dollars, which are great for the people who first get their hands on them, who are all extraordinarily wealthy, but really bad for you and me when we finally get around to going to the grocery store. That's why it hurts a lot more every time you go to the grocery store nowadays than it did back in 2019. And so we need to focus on all of the external factors that are impacting inflation generally, and that will have an impact on bringing the cost of housing down. Now, of course, that's not enough. We also need to look at the burdensome permitting process and regulation that has impacted the fact that despite that we're in a comparable state to, say, a state like Wisconsin, it costs roughly $100,000 more to build the same house here than it does there. There's no rational, logical, market-based reason for that. That's because of the imposition at government at all levels in our state. We need to look at that. We need to look at a more friendly business environment in order to provide more productivity, because as it turns out, when you make more stuff and you sell more things and you're busier, you have more wealth, and that enables you to take care of basic needs such as housing. And we also need to take a look at our education system. It's deeply failing our students. 50% of kids can't read or write at grade level. That's going to impact their ability to make a living and therefore to provide for their basic needs.
Thank you. We'll move next to Mr. Boland.
So currently in Minnesota, we have programs for first-time home buyers as well as for first-generation home buyers. And these are important things that we have available. I believe, I'm not going to make assumptions, but I believe that I'm the youngest person on this stage right now. And I have a lot of friends who are in the position where they can afford to pay a cheap rent, but they can't afford to even save up for a down payment on a house. So what this means is that they're going to be in the situation where they are throwing their money away paying, instead of their own mortgage, they're going to be paying their landlord's mortgage. We need to find a way to get these people out of this situation. And so I do believe that continuing and possibly expanding the first-time home buyer assistance can be really useful. Now, these are not handouts. This is assistance that will then need to be paid back. And so going beyond that, I don't believe that the state has any role in zoning. I believe that that is a local issue that needs to be handled at a local level. We don't need a one-size-fits-all policy. We certainly don't need St. Paul coming into Elk River and telling us how we need to do things here. I believe, and that's sort of a general philosophy of mine. When the local government can do things, let the local government do it. But when there is something where we can provide a significant boost to a young person's life, we need to do that, because this sets them up for the rest of their lives. My parents were able to afford a home on one income. You can't do that anymore, and they still live in that home. So we need to find a way to make this more feasible for younger Minnesotans.
Thank you. We'll move next to Mr. Novotny.
Thank you. Can't agree with the two gentlemen that have spoke any more than they have. Couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Boland, on the cost being up there that we need to get driven down. So since it's been covered so well, I'm going to move on to something else and kind of in the same category on housing cost, and that is going to be property taxes. I've got a plan. I've been working with Commissioner Halls on reducing property taxes. It's a 4-point plan. We've already talked about some of them with the housing cost, but we want to cap overall property tax value increases. We want to cap the value, we want to cap the tax, and we want to cap what senior citizens' property values and things can be so that they are not priced out of their home. Now, we've looked at this system. I thought it was a great idea when Commissioner Halls brought it to me and we started looking at it and building this plan, but it's been done in Minnesota before. And if you look, it's been done twice before. It's always been done when the Republicans have control, and then as soon as the Democrats come in, they start phasing out these programs like the caps. It's just reasonable. The government can't be the only person that can just arbitrarily raise taxes. And there's not a business that can say, my taxes went up, so I'm just going to raise my prices. If you raise your prices too high, you will lose income, you'll lose that revenue, you're going to go broke. The state, the county, everyone should be responsible and live within reasonable measures. We shouldn't just be able to arbitrarily jack houses up. If we looked at some of the adjustments that were done this last year with property taxes, senior citizens were getting $1,000 increases on their homes. I don't want to see any senior getting priced out of their house.
Thank you. Lastly, we'll move to Ms. Buckmeyer.
Okay, thank you.
2 minutes.
In housing and affordable housing are critical issues that we need to approach holistically, considering all members of our communities, not just those looking to buy single-family homes. We need to support renters, first-time home buyers, those interested in townhomes, condos, and other types of properties. Home ownership is more than just owning property. It's a pathway to building wealth and providing family stability and fostering vibrant communities. Unfortunately, more and more Minnesotans are being priced out. We need to look at competition and rule out competition from corporate buyers and to increase opportunities for renters and first-time home buyers. I will support expanding access to down payment assistance programs, affordable mortgage options, and helping families overcome financial barriers to home ownership. I would advocate for policies to limit corporate ownership of single-family homes, ensuring more properties remain available to those individual buyers. The state of Minnesota has invested a historic $1 billion in housing, and that's a great start, but we must continue to work with our cities, our counties, and our federal partners to address these issues. We need to develop affordable housing options across all types. Programs like down payment assistance, again, affordable housing grants for builders are critical in making home ownership a reality for more Minnesotans. Our goal is to create housing market that works for everyone. By focusing on affordability and accessibility, we can ensure that Minnesotans have the opportunity to live in stable, healthy, and vibrant communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all of the responses. We did have one other topic in governance, but we are pressing up against our time limit, and I do want to allow each candidate 1 minute to do a wrap-up, and you can speak to whatever it is you want the voters to know about yourself before they head to the polls in November. So why don't we start with Ms. Buckmeyer? You got 1 minute for a wrap-up.
Okay, thank you. So again, good evening again. We had a great evening here this evening. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this forum. And I'd like to also thank everybody here for participating in this important conversation to help us learn, engage, and work together in the direction that our state will take. Again, my name's Sonia Buckmeyer. I'm running for state representative in 30A. And I love our community, and I want to be part of making it better. My husband and I chose to build a home here, start a family here, and raise our 4 children here. We've become deeply connected to this community over the last 30 years, and that's why I'm running, to continue building on what makes Minnesota a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And we need to do this together. And I believe it's time that we put people before politics, and I'm looking forward to working together to earn your vote come November.
Thank you. Mr. Novotny.
I'd like to thank the Chamber for hosting this, for the staff that's here tonight producing it. I'd like to thank you, Matt, for running the program, taking this time to be here. I'd like to thank, most importantly, the people that are here in the crowd and watching at home that are taking the time to be informed. I hope that you've got enough information to make a decision, and if you haven't, contact any of us and we'll answer your questions for you. There's one vote that you make at the start of every session that is the most important vote you will make, and that vote is for the Speaker of the House. And that vote will determine the flow of the bills for the rest of the year. I've been down there 5 years. I've been in the minority in the House for all 5 years. Thankfully, for 3 of those years, the Senate was controlled by the GOP, and there was a split legislature. So we had representation for 49% of the state. And if you watched in that time, when I first got elected, they were all excited about a $4.5 billion surplus. My name is Paul Novotny. I appreciate your vote, and I endorse this message.
Thank you. Mr. Bolin.
How could I top that? All right, so I'm running to give back to our community. I'm a medical doctor. This isn't something I really ever thought I would ever do. We have one-party control in our area, and it's led to a sense of complacency because our representatives are more accountable to their party than they are to the voters. My dad is a union tradesman. My mom grew up on a farm in Zimmerman. I know what it's like to struggle. My parents split a $1 pizza in Jacksonville, Florida when my dad was in the Navy shortly before I was born. I grew up clipping coupons with my mom on the living room floor. So I know what it's like to struggle. And I'm going to go to St. Paul as a consensus builder. As when we were talking about housing, my opponent to my left here agreed with me. And so I can build that consensus down at the Capitol. And so I humbly ask for your vote, and I thank the Chamber for hosting tonight and for all of you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Hudson.
Well, I'll join my colleagues here in thanking the Chamber and all of you for being here and for viewing this evening. Let me tell you how you can discern whether or not someone is putting people over politics. Look at the focus of their orientation. If they're looking at the next 2 years, the next 4 years, the next election, they're putting politics over people. I was on a city council in Albertville. I already mentioned it. I was there for 7 years. And in that time, we dealt with what we call a comprehensive plan that looks at 30 years into the future. And the task from council to council is to take that wheel and make minor adjustments to keep the car on the road. That's not how it works in St. Paul, because politics very much is placed over people. We saw it for the last 2 years. We need to start looking at plans that don't necessarily deliver a political return or an electoral return 2 or 4 years from now, but are going to leave our children and our grandchildren in a much better state than we currently find ourselves. My name is Walter Hudson. I appreciate your consideration. Thank
you. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for participating tonight. We greatly appreciate you, your willingness to come and answer some of these questions and help inform our voters before they head to the polls in November. And for everyone here and at home that's watching, thank you for joining us tonight.